Hi, I'm Angela Wolf. I'm a fashion designer and online instructor, and today we're going to go back to the 70s. Remember the pantsuits, or I should say jumpsuits? They were the nice pants with the top, but they were connected at the waist. Sometimes it was a tailored outfit, sometimes it was elastic. Well, guess what? They're in style again, but thankfully our fabrics have really changed. Now we have a lot of options. So I want to show you how to take any pattern and create the style, and what to look for and some things to be cautious about. So follow along. We're going to make a jumpsuit that has an elastic waistband. Now you could make this out of many different fabrics. I purposely chose a fabric that has a little bit of stretch but not a lot, because if you go with the stretch fabric, it's very easy to make. So this one's a little more challenging, so I can help you work through some things if you get going on this. So here is my beautiful sketch. This would be a pants pattern, any pants pattern. This, I'm just going to say, is flat front, no pleats or anything like that. And then this is just a basic top. So it could be a knit pattern if you're going to have a stretchy fabric, but make sure you try it on and it's not too tight. The other thing to keep in mind is for this, let's just picture we're going to make this out of a jersey knit, which is really flowy. You don't want it to be skin tight. You'd want to have a little bit of room, and maybe once the elastic at the waist, the top would blouse over. All of these things you need to keep in mind while you're designing this pattern. So here's my basic pant. Let's say that this has a waistband. It doesn't even have an elastic waist. So this is my pant. It fits great. It's a little bit loose. Look at this. This is your hip. If I have a fabric that does not stretch, I need to make sure that the waist is as wide as the hip. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get them on. Even if you have a fabric that has a light stretch, you still might want to do this. So what I do is I usually line up the ruler with the grain line. So I just made a grain line right there, and squish it over until this line right here will be parallel to your grain line. And all you have to do is start at the hip line and draw a line straight up, just like that. Now make sure you don't have a sharp edge right here, but that would be my seam. Now if these pants were real tapered in, it doesn't matter from this point down, you just want to make sure you can get them on and off. Okay, let's look at the top. If you want this to fit your waist, looking at this top, I'm going to just say that this is the actual natural waist. Our natural waist is where, when we move a little bit, that's our waist. Most of us don't wear our pants that high. Some of us do, but most of us don't anymore, so people have a hard time finding that. Find your natural waist, and then do you want this top to kind of blouse on over the elastic? Okay, so let's give ourselves, say, 3 inches. So here I've added 3 inches to where my waist is. That gives me just enough room to fold over. Now I haven't added seam allowances yet, but I would draw a line here. Okay, so we've decided a couple things. Here's my waist. Now on these pants here, I would have to add a waistband. So when I tried these pants on before, I realized that the waistband actually did hit at my natural waist. So this waistband that's not attached to the pants is actually where my waist is. Or are these low-rise pants where you have to add more length to the top. So follow along. Here's your hip, and you need to mark where your actual waist is on these pants. So since these pants had a waistband that we're not attaching, this would be the actual natural waist. So I would extend these lines up right just like this. Don't be afraid to mark around on your pattern. It's very, very simple. These are just straight lines. If you're worried, just make them a little higher, because you can always take away, you just can't add. So if this is going to be my natural waist, and the pants you want to fit really well. You don't want them to be baggy. So I'm just going to add a seam allowance then. Let me use a black pen here. So if this is going to be the top of my pants, right here, I just need to add a seam allowance, whatever that is. What's the seam allowance? It's going to be the same for the pants and for the top. And don't forget you have to add elastic in there. So for elastic, I'm going to use this here. You could also use 1 inch elastic, whatever you're comfortable with. Don't go to like 2 inches. That's just so thick. And so when you move around, it's just not comfortable. And also don't go to as little as a 1/2 inch, because when you attach this elastic together, unfortunately, the 1/2 inch keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it can't hold up all those pants. So I'm going to use this size. Actually, let's just go with the 1 inch, but just know you could use either. So for this exact seam here, I would add 1 inch for the elastic and a seam allowance. because we're going to be trimming some things as well, okay? And then for this, we're going to do the same thing. We need to add 1 inch and a seam allowance. And that would be to use a 1 inch elastic. If you're using 3/4, then you would add 3/4 plus a seam allowance, okay? Okay, lastly, and then we'll get onto the pattern, the actual pieces. Whatever the width is across here, where your natural waist is, from the center, let's say this is the center front pant, to the side, if you multiplied that times 2, which would be your full front from side to side, that would need to equal from here to here times 2, okay? So whatever this is going to have to attach. They're kind of backwards, but you just have to imagine this is the center seam and this is the center seam. So these two need to meet on each side. Look at this pattern piece right here. This is what I'm talking about. This is a better visual. Here's my little mini pants. These are not mine, by the way. I just made a mini sample for you. Here's the pants and here's the top. These two need to meet. So for example, this one is too wide. So I would fold this in half. You can see it looks just like the top I have here. And I would just trim off a little bit, starting at the waist and going down. That looks a little better. Pretty good. I would even trim a little bit more. But the concept is you're going to finish the top, finish the pants, and sew them together. But you don't want all that bulk. If we were to sew these together right now, and this was going to be where we're going to add elastic and we have all this in here, that's like 4 layers by the time you fold that over of fabric. So here's my pants, here's my top. I have a couple that are already sewn. Let me move some of this out of the way here. So here's my mini pants sewn all the way around. And here is my top. This is just a tank style. This is a ponte knit. Again, it has a little bit of stretch. Notice I left the top open. The reason for that is because it's much easier to get inside of these. Now these are mini pants, but it's still easier to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this with right sides together. And I'm going to just line this up. Notice I put a snip in the center front and a snip in the center back. It makes it so much easier to line up your garment and make sure that you don't put it on and half your top is cockeyed. So this makes sure everything is even. I'm just going to pin each seam. And once you do this, which way do you want your seam to go for your elastic? Well, it really doesn't matter. Because either way it's going to fold. I usually go down because it's just a natural place on the pants to go. But here we go. So you can see this is sewn right side together. You're going to stitch all the way around that. And when you're finished stitching, I'm just going to put a pin here to show you the stitching. When you're finished stitching that, you're going to take, on the top, you're going to trim all the way your hem allowance here, your seam allowance. You're going to trim one of these away, and it's going to be the top. Because when this goes, okay, if you trim the top, then your seam is going to fold this way, and you're going to encase your elastic there. Okay? Here's one that's already pinned, and we're going to do a little bit of sewing here because I want to show you something. This one is already pinned. Now this one I chose to go towards the bottom of the pant, and you can see I've already trimmed that seam allowance in here. I've pressed this under. Now this knit, although it's kind of a real polyester, very difficult, but it's a great fabric because it hardly wrinkles. If you just press it, it's not going to hardly stay. So give it a good pressing. Use a clapper to hold it. And that gives you a great crease for this allowance here that we're going to have to sew. So I'm going to stitch that just a little bit. But one more thing I'm going to grab here is you have to have your elastic. Put it around your body. Now this obviously is not my size, but you would put it around your body, make it tight, and then make it 1 inch tighter. Like if it fit perfect here, make it 1 inch tighter. And give yourself 2 lines to follow. This is where it's going to meet again after we sew this casing. Here is a little bodkin. You could also use a bobby pin, or not a bobby pin, just a pin. Here you go. That makes it tight. So once I stitch around this entire thing, I'm going to leave just a little bit of an opening right here, and that's where the elastic is going to go in. And it's just going to slide all the way through here. So I just want to bring this to the sewing machine and show you a few more things, but you're almost ready to make your jumpsuit. So I have this pinned. The reason I told you it's easier to leave the top open, if you are making a smaller garment, it's so easy to slide this onto the machine like this. Looks like I've put my pins in backwards, but we're just going to make it work for now. I'm using a regular straight stitch, and I'm just going to stitch just a little bit on here. What I want to point out is that on this stretch fabric, if you're going to be using a fabric that you're going to need to stretch to get into, then you need to use a little bit of a zigzag stitch. In this case, my hip is wide enough at the waist, and I'm not going to be stretching the fabric. So I just have a straight stitch, and I'm just going to go all the way around. I'm actually not going to go all the way around with you watching, but this is what you'll do. I'm just going to go a little ways, and I'm going to leave an opening right here. Just leave yourself just a little bit of a gap there. Okay, so you would leave yourself a little opening so you can get that elastic in and out. This is what I want to show you. So it looks just like this, okay? And then what you have is you have this little part that would slide in that hole, and you would slide it all the way around, and that's why we have this little black strip on here, because once this gets all the way around, let's just picture this is all the way through, you would remove this, and it would be very simple to line these both lines up. It's hard to see when it's inside that casing. And then your elastic is finished, and just close out that stitch. Just top stitch over that. And one more quick point, you need to get into this thing. So you either need to have a wider neckline or add a slit in the back or a little zipper at your top neck. So don't forget, you got to get in and out of this too. So that's how easy it is to make a jumpsuit.